Welcome back, Java students. In today's video, we're going to talk about objects. So as we've been learning about in class so far, objects are a way to kind of reorganize and restructure our code. They allow us to have a container to hold variables, and they allow us to have a data type that does more than just hold a value. It also has the ability to perform functions. So we've seen one in class already that is the ball object and that main class. So I'm inside of that same project, and I'm just going to make a new one that we'll talk through today. And that one is going to be, like a Tamagotchi, a dog object, as I'm currently sitting outside with the puppies. This dog object is going to be its own new separate class. So the first thing that I'm going to do on IntelliJ is I'm going to make a new Java class, and I'm going to name it dog, because that is going to be the name of my object, is dog. And now I need to think about all of the things that are the variables for a dog, and all of the things that are going to be actions for a dog are going to be pieces of code that I put into this dog class. Then in a separate class, I will use this dog object. So remember, this is just a template and a placeholder for variables and for actions that we will have to use elsewhere. So for example, if we were thinking about a dog, there are many things that make, real life animals and pets what they are. But in its simplest form, or maybe you want to have a virtual pet form, let's have a dog that has a name. Let's have a dog that has some energy and a happiness. Happiness. So our dog is going to have just those three variables for right now: a name, some energy, and some happiness. And those things will be set by the program in the sense of what actual values they have. Some methods that we might, or actions that we might want a dog to be able to have, you can't hear it in the background, bark is one that we might want to have. So let's add in an action that we'll call bark. So we'll write public void bark, which is a method. And all that method is going to do in this case is we're just going to print out woof, as you can hear in the background. Print out woof, and that's a method that we can have that dog do. Maybe we can also have that dog do things like we will feed it, which will probably increase both its energy, and probably will increase its happiness as well. We can also probably have a method called play, and that one will decrease the dog's energy. Energy. But again, increase its happiness. And then especially when dealing with puppies and training young dogs and young pets, you also sometimes have to, teach them a lesson. Tell them when they're doing something wrong, so we will have a scold method, which will decrease their happiness momentarily so that they learn their lesson and don't perform whatever the bad action is again. So now my dog has those 4 actions available. One is a little bit more the dog itself acting. The other 3 are more how I am interacting with the dog. But either way, these are actions that I might want to have so that I could, have a virtual pet. The final method that I want to include for my dog is going to be a constructor. But let's make a tester class and see what happens if I'm here right now as is. So for the moment, I'm purposefully not including the idea of a constructor. And instead, we're just going to have a dog with some variables and some actions. So I'm going to make a new Java class that I'm going to call tester. And inside of this class, we need a main method so that this code will actually be run. And inside of here is where we're going to create our dog object and then ask the dog to perform the actions that it has available to it. So I can say dog D1 is a new dog. And that's the way that we declare and initialize an object. So data type, name, equals, and then value. And the value for objects, we say new, and then the object name again. So now I'm going to create a dog, D1, that has the name Kaya, which is the mom dog. It's going to have the name Kaya. D1 dot, currently her energy is rather low, so I'm going to make this like, I'll think of my energy variables as kind of being a percentage and my food variable as being a percentage. So her energy is low, but she did just get to go dig through my sister's trash, so she is feeling quite happy with herself at this moment. So with all of that in mind, I've now created a dog named Kaya, has low energy and high happiness, in the sense of if these numbers were a percentage out of 100. And so then I can print out and say, introducing, and put her name. And then on a separate line, I'm going to print out and say energy, and I'll put that variable. And then happiness. So when I run this, I've now made a dog object called D1. D1 holds 3 variables, name, energy, and happiness. And then I'm printing out, oops, with the typo, I'm printing out introducing D1.name, which should be Kaya. Her energy is 20, because that's what we set it to be, and her happiness is 90, because that's what we set it to be. So now let's test out and make sure that our methods are working the way we want them to. So inside of the tester class, now let's maybe feed Kaya. So let's do d1.feed to feed her, and then we will reprint out her energy and happiness to see what's happened. I'm going to leave a line space there. So then maybe let's feed her. Then let's play with her. Let's have her bark while she's playing. And then finally, let's scold her because maybe she bit too hard during playtime. And see what happens to our variables as a result. So here we go. When I rerun it this time, her energy starts at 20 and 90. After we feed her, her energy and her happiness increase. After we play, her energy decreases and her happiness continues to increase. Then she barks twice while we're playing. And then I scold her for biting too hard, so her energy stays the same and her happiness decreases. So this is doing all the things we want it to. Increasing and decreasing by 1 might not be exactly what we want now in implementation, but that's something we can go back and change and we're in control of. The last thing that we're going to do here in order to really fully turn this into an object so that I can have many is I want to get rid of the fact that I'm setting the values of the variables in 4 separate lines and accessing the variables in this way. I want this line of code where I set the value of the variable equal to something to basically be done on the object side, so where that object exists. So I wish that those 3 lines could happen on the object side. So let's cut them and move them there. I wish that I could just say name equals Kaya, energy equals 20, and happiness equals 90. However, there's a few reasons why this doesn't work. First of all, D1 isn't a variable that exists inside of the dog class. D1 is a variable inside of the tester class. Additionally, we want to be able to have more than one dog object, maybe. Kaya has 3 puppies, and I would love for each of them to also be a dog in my virtual world. But right now, if I set every dog's name to be Kaya, its energy to be 20, and its happiness to be 90, every dog object I make will have those 3 variables, and that's not exactly what I want. So the workaround to do this is to make a constructor, which is a method that's going to take inputs to set these values. And this gets around both of the issues. Number one, I no longer need to say D1. I can just set name equals, energy equals, and happiness equals the way I want to. And also it allows me to change those inputs for different dog objects so that not every dog is named Kaya. So with that in mind, let's make that constructor. Now, from your notes, a constructor is a method. It needs the word public. You don't need the word void. But then the name of the method needs to exactly match the name of the class. So this is going to be public dog. And then I'm going to leave some space. Now, I want to be able to get 3 inputs to set the values of these 3 variables. So I'm going to expect 3 inputs from this method. So I'm going to expect a string that will be the name. I'm going to expect an integer that will be the energy. And I'm going to expect another integer that will be the happiness level. So I can set the values of the variables. So whatever gets input here will be then what I want to save into the string name that's up above. So I'm going to delete these 3 lines because I don't want every dog's name to be Kaya, so I don't need that anymore. So this is the basics and the skeleton of our constructor. The other part that we need to do is then we need to take this input and actually set it equal to the values that are inside of our variables here. Now, there's a bit of confusion that's going on right now in this moment because this variable called name is different than this variable called name. The second variable called name that's on line 7 is a variable that exists only within the method of the constructor dog. The variable called name that's on line 3 is a variable that exists for the entirety of the public dog class. But it is difficult for IntelliJ to know which version you mean when we're talking about inside of this method. Because inside of this method, there are 2 variables, both called name. So we use the keyword this here to help us out. This is a keyword in Java that talks about I'm going to momentarily call them global variables, or the variables that are used throughout the whole class. And that's the keyword to let me know of the 2 variables called name, I'm referring to this one at the top. So this dot name is equal to name. This dot energy is equal to energy. And this dot happiness is equal to happiness. So now let's do a check here. This dot name is referring to name that's up on the string name variable that's up on line 3. The name that I'm clicking on right now with my cursor is referring to the name variable that is created on line 7, the input. And those are separate of one another and distinct in that way. Our other option, our other workaround, is to continually make sure that we don't reuse variable names. So instead, I could call this name input, energy input, and happiness input. And then I don't have to think about and worry about which version of those variables am I referring to. I could simply say name is equal to, name is equal to name input. And energy is equal to energy input. And happiness is equal to happiness input. So now they are distinct and unique from one another. Both methods are fine in order to figure out or to set the values of these variables inside of the constructor. You will often see me using the this dot method or version. Method's a confusing word to use there, sorry. The this dot version will be my preferred version, but you are welcome to use either one. And then the last thing that we need to do is, now that we have a constructor, we have one final step that we need to do, and that is changing how we have created, declared, and initialized the variable in our tester class. So now, over inside of our tester class, we've removed the lines that used to say d1.name equals Kaya, d1.energy equals blah, 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 and so on and so forth. Now, because I have made this constructor, when I declare and initialize my variable d1, that is a dog object, it's expecting that I have 4 variables that get input right inside of these parentheses. It is expecting to see, or sorry, not 4 variables, 3 variables, a string, and then 2 integers. So inside of the parentheses right here, it's expecting to see 3 strings, or 3 variables, so sorry, a string and 2 integers. So let's do it inside of here. The name for this dog is going to be Kaya. Her energy level we'll set to 30, I think it was 20 from before, and then we'll set her happiness to be 90. And now what that's doing is these 3 inputs are being sent over to dog and saved as name input, energy input, and happiness input, which then makes them saved into name, energy, and happiness accordingly. So once we've added in that constructor, we've changed the way that we declare and initialize that dog object, and we can leave the rest of the code, and when we rerun it, it should look and appear as though nothing has changed beyond the fact that I changed the energy input amount. And it has in fact done the same thing. The functionality stays the same. Things increase when I feed her. Her happiness increases when I play with her, and her energy decreases. And then finally her happiness decreases once I've scolded her. And there we go. That is our dog object.